What is up, everybody? I'm No Lux Given here with your afternoon snap, and today we are talking about Iron Lad, which does it all. As the title of this video suggests, Iron Lad is really powerful, I think, and definitely worth the 6,000 tokens to pick it up right away. Part of that is because you can play Iron Lad in a variety of different lists, but I'm just playing it in this one, and I've used this list to climb from rank 75 all the way up to rank 97, where I currently sit, and I'm sure I will hit infinite either tonight or tomorrow. So like this video and subscribe if you want to see more sweet Iron Lad gameplay. But for right now, I just want to get into the variety of different things that Iron Lad can do in just this deck. And you can see we already have a lot to talk about. We're going to lead with the most important thing that Iron Lad can do, which is just be another copy of Galactus. And this Galactus list is really, really consistent. We'll break down some of the math behind that in just a little bit, but if you are able to play Kang on the turn that you draw him, that's going to mean that your deck is even smaller, and then you've got America Chavez in the deck. And then with Iron Lad, it's basically going to mean that next turn, we're looking at a 50-50. We're either going to draw Galactus next turn, or we're not going to. And then we're gonna have three cards in our deck. America, which will be on the bottom of our deck, Galactus, and one other card. And so Iron Lad is 50-50 to hit that Galactus, which just makes the deck really, really consistent overall. And as you will see on turn 5, my opponent's got some weird stuff going on, by the way. Don't worry about all that. But on turn 5, we don't draw Galactus. We draw Null, which is a cool card to draw if Iron Lad happens to turn into Galactus. And obviously, this is a bit of a highlight video, but it's a 50-50. It's a 50-50 only in these small corner cases where you haven't drawn Galactus already. And I think that's the important thing to note. We can see that I had 3 cards in my deck. Again, that's Galactus, America, and then one other card, Wave. So now we'll draw America, and we won't even have drawn Galactus, but we will have blown up everything. And one really cool thing about Iron Lad this game is it even allows me to play around some other things here that Galactus wouldn't play around. I don't have to worry about Shang-Chi. I also don't have to worry about Leader. Iron Lad's additional 5 power on my opponent means that I'm still able to get the win even against a Leader. I think this is kind of a weird concept to grasp, but it's something that I've talked about with Absorbing Man a lot, which we also see is in my hand this game and is also not going to have any use for me. I use Electro into Bar Sinister to give myself 4 extra energy, and now I just need to draw Galactus, and I can play Galactus. I even have priority going into turn 4, though with Cosmo in the icebox, it means I only have one location left, Jotunheim, to potentially play Galactus. So I'll play Kang and Snap, though this could potentially go awry for me. If my opponent has any type of disruption and I don't draw Galactus this turn, when I recycle the deck through with Kang, then I might need to play Iron Lad. And as we can see, my opponent has Titania plus a Nightcrawler to give me no reasonable options to play Galactus here. So I would, in theory, need to use Iron Lad this turn while I still have priority and still have a lane where I can play Galactus. However, I do draw Galactus this turn. And this I feel like is kind of weird it's a weird point to make in an Iron Lad video. But the point is, the deck is already so consistent with Kang and with America and with Absorbing Man that you don't need Iron Lad most of the time. It's just those small percentages of the time where the Galactus is like the third to last card on the left in your deck. But in those corner cases, you just increase your win percentage by that much more, and that's where Iron Lad really comes in handy. And then on this turn, I guess we could use the Iron Lad here if we don't draw exactly Spider-Man, but we draw Spider-Man. And I'm going to get into some more examples where Iron Lad is a little bit more relevant, but I think it's important to point out that the games where Iron Lad isn't relevant are totally fine because you're winning those games anyways, because you don't need to use the Iron Lad. So I think that's important just to keep in perspective. Sometimes you're not going to need Iron Lad, and that's totally fine. But The times that you do, like that first game that we showcased, it's obviously going to be essential to grabbing you the win. Now, when I look at a Galactus list, there's 4 main parts, 4 different types of cards in a Galactus list that really pull the whole thing together. And there's 2 other parts that you can play that I have played in the past, but I'm not currently playing in this version. I'm just playing the core 4 parts, and I'll break all of those things down here. So the first thing that a Galactus deck needs, assuming we're talking about a turn 4, turn 5 Galactus list. There are some Galactus lists that try to play Galactus on turn 6 with Nimrod and stuff like that, but I do think that these are the most consistent builds here with Electro and Wave. And that's our first slide. It's Ramp, Electro, Wave, and then also Psylocke, which isn't pictured, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but I think that you could run Psylocke in the list if you just want to make it a little bit more consistent even. But here's the point that I'm getting to. If you don't draw any of your ramp cards, you can also use Iron Lad to be an additional copy of any of these other cards here on the screen. We'll look at 2 examples of those things now. You can see we've drawn all of the cards in our deck except for Wave and Electro. So on turn 4, I'm going to drop Iron Lad. This is where I'm saying like a Psylocke could come in handy too. But we are just going to drop Iron Lad here, hope to hit either Wave or Electro to then allow me to play the turn 5 Galactus and follow that up with Null. And that will be strong enough to take it down here. So I'll jump ahead just a little bit. It hits the Wave. As you can see, I'm going to Galactus into Vormir just to continue to feed the Null even more. As we go on, my opponent plays a Lizard into that first location. We're going to blow up everything with Galactus, sending Null up to what is that, 25? Pretty nice. And we even get some additional power off of the Null. Oh, that's right, Galactus will also die. And then whenever my opponent plays into Vormir will also die. But we do get some additional power into Null as well, just from the Iron Lad, which is 6 power itself. So that's pretty fun. But 27 power here on the final turn means that we're going to be able to find the win. And this is basically the exact same example here. We haven't drawn either Wave or Electro, but we are able to use Iron Lad to just make our deck a little bit more consistent, set up for that turn 5 Galactus into Null, which will be enough to grab the win. I'll jump ahead again as we blow through it. Oh, and I can even use Kang in this game to check, just to make sure the coast is clear. The second piece to the Galactus list puzzle is Disruption, and these cards do a variety of different things in the deck. The first of which is once Galactus has destroyed the other 2 locations, disrupting your opponent in the only location remaining, so that way they can't play on the final turn of the game, is generally game winning. But these cards can also win games where Galactus just isn't involved at all, allowing you to lock down your opponent's location and just make things tough for them. The other thing that they do is allow you to play around Arrow, because Arrow can't get played then at a particular location on the turn where you drop your Galactus. And I'm also going to give an honorable mention in the Disruption category to Absorbing Man, mostly for its ability to copy Spider-Man, which we looked at in Monday's video, but also Absorbing Man allows you to play around Arrow, so it's kind of fitting in the theme with the other cards in that way. Things are going well for me in this game. Galactus is able to blow up the other 2 locations on turn 4, and I have Null, and then I also on turn 5 draw Death. So I'm going to be able to drop a ton of power. The interesting thing on the topic of Disruption, there's actually a lot of Disruption in all decks right now, with the very popular deck playing Nebula and Professor X and Spider-Man and Storm, but Iron Lad allowing you to find your own disruption can still allow you to compete in those scenarios. Now, I think we're just playing up against a bot here, so it's not like super important. They were about to drop Mystique on a Scarlet Witch, but the important thing here is that we can play Iron Lad and look for either Spider-Man or Dr. Octopus to just totally lock my opponent out of the final turn of the game, where we'll be able to drop 21 power with Death plus America. Looks like my opponent's going to play nothing on turn 5 now, so we're going to web them and that will lock it up. But this game I thought was particularly fun. In this one, I actually have it all. I've got the ramp, I've got the disruption, I've got the Galactus, and I've got the finisher. We'll talk about the finishers in just a second. But awkwardly, my opponent might have the finisher too. They use White Queen, and that might have just stolen my null. It might have just stolen Galactus, at which point I don't care, they can have Galactus, but if it stole my null, what I would really like to do here is use Iron Lad to hit Dr. Octopus to take that null and put it back on the battlefield. So that's what I'm gonna go for here, and we get it done. This deck for my opponent, Zabu lists with White Queen aren't typically decks that run Arrow, so I didn't think it was super important to Spider-Man them on this turn because I'm just gonna play Galactus and null, and Iron Lad, like I said earlier, actually contributes more to your future nulls. So we do wind up grabbing the null from them, and then they Enchantress it, but the important thing here is now they won't have it for the final turn. So I'll be able to Galactus over into New York. Maybe they'll play some more cards over into the flooded location while they still have the opportunity to do so. They could have also moved Jeff out of Grand Central to try to get some use out of Grand Central this turn. All they wind up doing is moving out the Nightcrawler, and then as you'll see, we're going to be able to throw down a 29-point null, and my opponent knows it's coming because of White Queen, so they throw in the towel. Finishers are the second to last part of a Galactus list, with Shang-Chi, Death, and Null being the cards that I've decided to play in this version. Now, interestingly, Iron Lad copying Death is a total miss. It's worse than hitting a rock, potentially even, because then it can't get the bonus in Washington, D.C. So that part isn't great, and I could potentially see cutting Death specifically for Psylocke, just to add a little bit more ramp into the deck. You could also potentially cut one of the cards in the fourth and final section to throw Psylocke in the deck, but in the same way that Iron Lad can be copies of any of the other cards, it can be copies of both Shang-Chi and Null if you haven't drawn them on the final turn and just want a way to add a little bit more power, though with some randomness attached. So in this game here, we know we're going to be drawing America on the final turn. The only question is, what are we going to play as our finishers? And honestly, it's probably safer in this exact scenario to just play Death and America on the final turn. And that's why Death, I mean, it is still a really strong card, and you probably do still want it in the deck. It's just worth considering, do you want like a little bit more consistency with the Psylocke even? But the reason that you could potentially cut Death is because now with Iron Lad in the deck, you are going to be able to more consistently find Null as well. There's two cards left in the deck, so it would be a 50-50 between Absorbing Man and Null. My opponent is just going to retreat, so I'm not even sure what I was going to do yet. I haven't really thought about it. I think you probably just play Death plus America here regardless. You could also play Shang-Chi. You do have a lot of options, but the point still stands that Iron Lad just gives you more options, and those are always a good thing. If my opponent had a little bit more power on the board, if Sentinel and Agent were a little bit bigger to the point where I didn't really feel confident in either the Shang-Chi or the America play, then I just play Iron Lad plus Death, roll the 50-50. Half the time you hit it, half the time you miss. You can snap alongside that, which also provides a nice additional amount of pressure there and increases your chances to win even further. So my opponent probably would wind up retreating in these scenarios regardless, but more options, always a good thing. And that brings me to the final portion of a Galactus list. Galactus himself. A little bit anticlimactic, but of course you need Galactus in a Galactus list, and I don't just call this section Galactus, I call it consistency. That's what all of these cards are here to do. America, Kang, and now Iron Lad all help to make the deck just be a little bit smaller, so that way you get to play Galactus in as many of your games as possible. And Absorbing Man doesn't quite fit in this section. He's kind of like half disruption, half consistency, but he does allow you to actually activate Galactus more often against Arrow and weird things like that. So we'll throw him in this section too. And what I think is the most impressive part about this is that this section has more cards on the screen, even if we get rid of Absorbing Man. This is still 4 cards. This is 1/3 of the deck. This is more than any other section, which means that most of your Galactus list is just Galactus at the point where you are playing Iron Lad and Kang and America Chavez, and these get a little bit expensive. Galactus and Kang both being big bads, locked at 6k tokens, and now Iron Lad being a brand new card, so also going to be 6k tokens. But I think that it's really telling that you can play a Galactus list. Decks in Marvel Snap are only 12 cards, and I've got 5 cards right on the screen right now. And if half of your deck is contributing to making your deck more consistent, then you're just going to be able to win a whole bunch. I want to look at one more game to round out the video and also talk about some other, I said there's like 2 other potential sections to include in your Galactus list, so I'll use this game to talk about those as well. So one of the things that you can do is play for priority, and you can do that with Nebula, with Sunspot, with Lizard. There's a lot of ways to do this, and I talked about this recently when Baxter Building was the featured location. Part of the draw for doing this is that when you have priority, then you're going to be able to be less disrupted on your Galactus turn, and you're also going to fuel your Null. So there is some additional synergy in there with that. This game's a little bit awkward. I don't draw any ramp, and my opponent actually does. I will say the other section that you can include in a Galactus list is information. Yondu provides a little bit of both priority and information. Previously, I've played Daredevil in the list in my Professor X version. So that's one other thing that you can potentially add to your Galactus list. And then card draw, really just putting in a Adam Warlock package. That's like one other thing, but that's almost like its own specific deck at that point. But on turn 4, I'm going to drop the Iron Lad into Sinister London, and we've got a pretty crazy game here. My opponent is going to play the turn 4 Dr. Octopus, and first things first, that's going to get canked. So none of this really matters, though it will potentially allow us to see what Sinister London has in store and see some more cards in my opponent's hand, thanks to Dr. Octopus. They're going to get to see my entire hand, though, as their Dr. Octopus. They get another copy of that because of Sinister London. We will also get to see what is on top of my deck with the Iron Lad here. So that is kind of interesting as well. This is like a very, very specific example, but thought it was a fun one to end the video off with, because Galactus is on top of my deck. And Iron Lad unfortunately hops over into Hala and not over into the Quantum Realm, so that part is a little bit unfortunate. And honestly, I'm a little bit confused. I thought I understood how Kang worked, and I thought that Iron Lad would, or Sinister London would still make cards go to the same location. So I think about just playing Iron Lad into the Quantum Realm here. And if we do that, my opponent still plays to Sinister London, their second Doc Ock still goes into Hala, then we would be able to actually get a Galactus off. Now, we would get a Galactus off with not much else to show for it, so it's a little bit awkward, but I did still think about it, and ultimately actually just decided to still play Sinister London, or Iron Lad in Sinister London. My thought process is maybe my opponent would also overthink it and also play their Doc Ock into the Quantum Realm. Now, as it turns out, that's not how it is going to work. They're going to make the exact same play, just with slightly different results this time. And I think that maybe those slightly different results change some RNG factors in the game, because their second Doc Ock is still going to go to, oh yeah, we do get to Shang-Chi them, that's pretty cool. Their second Doc Ock is still going to go into Hala, but now my Iron Lad on this game actually decides it's going to go into the Quantum Realm instead. So I do get my Galactus off, and my opponent now has no cards in hand because of all of these Doc Ock shenanigans. I don't have any cards in hand either, but if we both just play 1 card per turn, my opponent will have 4 power total in the Quantum Realm, and I will have 10 power because, yeah, we're gonna set the power of anything that gets played for the rest of the game just to 2. So this seems like it's pretty good for me, and Iron Lad has found another really fun way to win here. We'll just throw down America on the final turn of the game. My opponent is going to snap, which is kind of interesting, and you might have an idea why. They've got 2 cards in deck, or 3 cards in deck, 1 card in hand. I was looking at my cards for a second. Their last card is Iron Lad, and Iron Lad hits the null and allows my opponent to find the win, and this was the first time my opponent had won a game of Marvel Snap, so they got super excited. But other than that, I thought this was a really fun way to close out the video and just show an Iron Lad doing things on both sides of the table. By the way, I think I mentioned this earlier on in the video. Part of the reason I did at one point, I'm almost positive I've said this already, at one point I cut Absorbing Man from this list in order to throw Psylocke in. And one of the cool things of doing that is you can go turn 2 Psylocke into turn 3 Iron Lad, potentially hitting Galactus. It's silly. You probably don't want to do that most of the time, but you can try to do it once just for fun. But the reason that ultimately I decided I needed to put Absorbing Man back in is because so many people are playing Galactus right now because of Iron Lad that more people are now playing Arrow just to play around Galactus. So I want Absorbing Man to play around the Arrow, to play around the Galactus. You see. So yeah, and one of the tricky things with this deck, and I've been saying this since Iron Lad was previewed, I think that this is really strong and is going to make the Galactus lists really, really consistent to the point where I don't know what the future of Galactus will be, if it's going to make enough people complain that things have to get changed. But for now, I'm having a ton of fun playing Iron Galactus, Iron Galactus. It's kind of a weird tongue twister there, but that's going to be it for me today. But I've got a bunch of other sweet Galactus games to showcase. So if you want to see more, hit that like button and subscribe. But for today, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm No Lex Given. Peace.